Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Grim Dawn is one of my most favorite aRPGs ever. It's been more than a couple of years since I last made a dedicated video about this amazing aRPG. I think I said enough in my last retrospective video about it, but in the meantime we got some major updates for the game as well as the announcement for a brand new expansion. Crate Entertainment, the studio behind Grim Dawn, has been pumping updates for this game on a regular basis, and that's one of the reasons why it managed to maintain such a healthy player base. That's very impressive, considering that Grim Dawn is mostly a single-player aRPG, even though it has multiplayer modes. I personally love the fact that this game is focused on single-player experience for many different reasons, and I'll talk about that a bit later in this video. Fangs of Asterkarn is the name of the upcoming third expansion, and it will bring some massive new gameplay features, which I'm going to cover in this video. This expansion is announced very early in its development, and it was supposed to come out all the way back in 2024. It turns out that was way too ambitious for Crate, and they pushed it back to late 2025. Well, now we know that didn't happen, but we can see a couple of different release dates in their June 2025 development updates, which will be spring or summer of 2026. This has not been confirmed yet, because they never mentioned the release date in the recent development updates. But I would be surprised if they push the release date even further than this, so it's safe to assume that we're going to get this expansion in just a couple of months from now. So now would be a great time to talk about this new massive expansion and all of its major features. Fangs of Asterkarn is Grim Dawn's biggest expansion yet, which is pretty impressive considering the size of the last two expansions. They were pretty big as well. Besides the DLC talk, I also want to give you some of my personal reasons why I think Grim Dawn is the best single-player aRPG to play in 2026. I continue playing some of my high-level characters, but I also made a new character, so I can talk about the new player experience. Crate has made some pretty important changes to the base game in recent years, so even if you are a returning player, some of the changes might surprise you. But let's start with all the new features we can expect in the upcoming expansion. Here are some raw numbers for Fangs of Asterkarn expansion. 3.55 square kilometers is the approximate size of the new map. To put this into perspective, it's roughly 110% as big as Ashes of Malmut, the previous DLC. That's pretty big actually, but the size of the map is not as important as the content we're going to get. According to their June 2025 development update, the new expansion is going to have 47 main/side quests, 54 new bosses and 8 nemesis encounters. That's a pretty big number of new boss encounters. I'm going to assume that a good amount of those new bosses are not going to be extremely challenging, but I'm really looking forward to see their unique mechanics. Crate is claiming that these bosses will feature some of the most advanced skill tech the game has had yet, and I fully believe that. Forgotten Gods, the last expansion, and some of the updates for Grim Dawn already improved some boss mechanics, along with introducing some great new fights in Forgotten Gods. So I already expected to see even better boss mechanics in Fangs of Asterkarn, and I'm really glad they confirmed this. Although I would not get extremely excited for this and expect some miracles with this game engine, because they were already pushing it to its limits. So I don't expect to see crazy boss fights like in Path of Exile 2 for example, that will be impossible. Grim Dawn is running on a very old engine, which was used for the development of Titan Quest 1, all the way back in 2006. It's the exact same engine with a lot of updates on top of it, and it was definitely not meant to be used in the way that Grim Dawn is using it nowadays. So even though these developers are already doing some miracles and quite possibly some black magic to get this engine to work like this, I have to keep my expectations under control. Even so, I'm really excited to see those new boss mechanics, because they're probably going to be the best fights we had so far. They also mentioned a super boss, or a couple of them actually. You can gain the attention of a super boss called Dread in the Ascendant mode, and this creature is supposed to be an extremely powerful boss, much more powerful than regular Nemesis bosses. If you're new to Grim Dawn, these Nemesis bosses are one of the strongest encounters in the game, and you would have to have an endgame character along with enough negative reputation with factions in order to start seeing these rare spawns on the map. Speaking of which, there was an update that tweaked the spawn rate of Nemesis bosses, which made it possible to see them spawn pretty much everywhere in the open world. Anyway, we can also expect a shit ton of new items, obviously, 380 new unique items to be more precise. What I'm also really excited for are new roguelike dungeons, which are planned for post-release. These dungeons will expand the world and add another 2 rounds of new bosses and unique loot drops. Going through these roguelike dungeons was, and it still is, one of my most favorite activities in Grim Dawn. You will need to craft a unique key with rare materials in order to open these dungeons at particular places on the map. Then you only get one chance to clear the whole dungeon and get some great loot until the gate closes and you need to use another key. By the way, the word dungeon doesn't do this feature justice because some of these places are pretty big and they are not even dungeons, they are very open. Anyway, Fangs of Asterkarn is also going to feature a new faction, which means we'll have another reputation to grind and probably more than that. They are probably going to add at least a couple of more reputations for different factions or monsters, which will trigger those new Nemesis bosses and more enemies in general. Fangs of Asterkarn will feature a brand new mastery as well. It's called the Berserker and is the 10th mastery in the game, if we count all masteries from the base game and other 2 expansions. The Berserker will be able to transform into ferocious beast-like forms, the Werewolf and Were-Raven. Werewolf is going to offer a melee playstyle, while Were-Raven is ranged. Both of these forms are supposed to have a unique playstyle, and they will automatically grant you 2 new active abilities when you transform. These forms are temporary, allowing you to enter the transformations for a limited time before they go on a cooldown. However, there are ways to extend the duration or even make them permanent with modifiers. One of the new abilities in the Berserker skill tree is called Onslaught, and it seems like it's going to be very interesting. It's yet another basic attack replacer, but with a nice twist. Onslaught will generate stacks of a new buff with the same name, and these stacks can be spent the next time you use a damaging cooldown ability. It's described as a make your own combo system, and you get to decide what the spender is. Sounds pretty cool. When they're not using their beast forms, Berserkers are specialized in dual weapon combat, so I expect to see some skills that will complement that playstyle as well. This is hands down one of my most, if not the most anticipated feature of the new expansion. I'm also really excited for mixing this mastery with other masteries in the game, and I really want to make a lighting werewolf build by combining it with shaman mastery, because it sounds freaking epic. That's the beauty of this progression system in Grim Dawn. Whenever Crate introduces a new mastery, which doesn't happen that often, it opens up so many new combinations and ways to play the game because you get to combine it with other existing masteries. Masteries are just another name for classes, by the way, if you're new to Grim Dawn. Another big feature of the new expansion is called the Ascendant mode, and it has a lot of different things related to it. Crate is even calling this mode the crowning system of the next expansion. When you reach level 100 with one of your characters, or if you already have a level 100 character, you'll be able to turn on this new difficulty mode. The new mode will be applied on top of the ultimate difficulty, and all of your progress will seamlessly transfer over to the new mode. You can also switch between the Ascension and ultimate difficulty without losing any progress. This new mode is intended to be challenging, similar to Shattered Realms' 60th Shard. Shattered Realms is one of the Grim Dawn's endgame systems, which works similar to Diablo 3 Rifts, to put it simply. 60th Shard is no joke, by the way, and it requires a pretty good character build with optimized gear. What's also really exciting about this new mode is how they plan to refresh the campaign experience and make the world exciting again. They even went so far to say that this mod will make the campaign world the 3rd pillar of the endgame. They aim to make common jobs more exciting, they are updating monster totems to have mini bosses at the end, they are refreshing treasure troves, and so on. We'll be able to find these special Ascension altars, which allow us to control all of these new mechanics. The last, but certainly not least, is the UI. The new UI will have orbs for your health and energy, but they also touched upon pretty much all UI elements and make them look a bit more modern. Even so, I think they managed to preserve the original look of the UI while making it slightly better and more modern. However, I don't like the orbs, but luckily you can switch back to the original UI style. Even the original UI will have all of these new updates, so it's up to you to decide what you want to use. I don't know, I never liked the orb UI style, not even in Diablo games. I think it's stupid, to be honest. There are even more features and changes you can find in these development updates, but that would sum up all the major features. Fangs of Asterkarn expansion is going to take place on a brand new map, obviously. And we know quite a bit about this new area from various development updates by Crate Entertainment. Asterkarn is primarily a snowy, mountainous area. The base game already had some snowy zones that we got to explore, but this expansion is going all out with this concept, and once again, Crate is pushing this old engine to its limits. The entrance to this new zone is supposed to be northwest of Fort Icon, so I assume they're going to add a similar world map like they did for Forgotten Gods, the last big expansion. That map felt a bit out of place, to be honest. Not from the gameplay side of things, but from the world map perspective and the way it was added in. I would prefer if they did it similar to the first big expansion, Ashes of Malmut. And maybe they will, we still don't know how the world map is going to look like in FOA. More importantly, the aesthetics of the new zones are great, and they talked about the new textures and assets for the snow and the zone in general. And yeah, judging by the screenshots, the snowy zones look pretty good for such an old game, but to be honest, it's nothing crazy for today's standards. However, the newest city in the expansion looks really impressive actually. Kurnhold is the name of the new city. It looks pretty damn big, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the biggest city in the game. It has multiple levels, judging from all of the screenshots, and it seems like it's going to be a fun hub area to hang around in. This place is the home of the new faction called Kern, and you can read the info about the lore related to them if you want to. I can't express enough how excited I am for this expansion. It goes without saying, but you can expect me to make videos about it along with a full review. I'll try my best to get my hands on the review copy so I can prepare those videos on the release date of the expansion, if possible. Now let's talk about the game in general a little bit and why you should consider playing it for the first time in 2026 or as a returning player. Well, I consider myself to be a returning player because I end up coming back to Grim Dawn every year and play it for at least a couple of months on regular basis. I would say it still holds up so well, and it has a lot of content to keep you busy for hundreds of hours. But Grim Dawn has never been about endless endgame systems, even though you can find such features in the game. I still think Grim Dawn is one of the most immersive aRPGs ever. Exploring this big open world and all of its zones feels amazing even today. It has one of the strongest, if not the strongest aRPG campaigns, and I think everyone who played this game will agree. I can say the same about the lore and the story, even though it's definitely not the main focus of the game. But if you want to get into it, you'll find a lot of lore notes and there is a decent amount of optional dialogue. To be honest, I only cared about this the first couple of times I went through the campaign, but after that it was all about the gameplay for me. However, that's pretty much everything I can ask for when it comes to stories in aRPGs. To go back to the exploration, it doesn't feel artificial like in many other aRPGs, where you get to feel like you're just exploring a bunch of narrow corridors with no soul. To put it simply, the world in Grim Dawn feels alive, and it's almost like you're exploring a third-person RPG. Another feature which contributes to this feeling is the faction system. Now, if you watched my old RPG videos, you know how much I love reputation systems in RPGs, especially when they are done properly. Well, Grim Dawn does a pretty good job with this system, which makes the game interesting from the gameplay and story perspectives. It's believable and logical in a way, which makes it feel more immersive than most aRPGs out there. All enemies you get to fight in Grim Dawn belong to a certain faction. They even fight between themselves, which makes sense from the story perspective. Once you kill enough enemies of a certain type and piss them off even more, you will unlock the toughest boss fights in the game. Well, not exactly, there are tougher boss fights you can find, but Nemesis bosses are still pretty tough, especially for new players. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it, and you'll struggle to find another aRPG that even cares about these details. You also have some important decisions to make in the story by befriending a faction or making them your enemy. Like I said before, some of these features make you feel like you're playing a third-person or a first-person open-world RPG. A large majority of these aRPGs are hyper-focused on the gameplay and endgame systems, while mostly ignoring all other features. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is a large audience that enjoys the pure hack-and-slash experience. But that's also the reason why Grim Dawn stands out, in a way. You can certainly play it and treat it as a pure hack-and-slash experience, but it also feels like a feature-complete immersive RPG. What I also love about it is how focused it is on the single-player experience, with no bullshit microtransactions or artificial player economy. Now, I know that some people love those features in games like Path of Exile, but I personally couldn't care less, and I know for a fact that there are a lot of people who think like me. I would rather pay $100 for a game once than having a free-to-play model with the in-game store, with a bunch of cosmetics that will simply ruin the visual progression of my character, but that's just me. There are no microtransactions in Grim Dawn, except a couple of what they called loyalist packs. These loyalist packs have a couple of cosmetics, but considering the massive amount of cool looking items you can find in the game, that's completely okay, and you get to support the developers with a couple of extra dollars if you really love the game. It's far from having a fully functional in-game store or anything like that, and it's sad that I even have to point that out because this used to be normal back in the day, believe it or not. The dual class system of Grim Dawn is still fun to play around with, even after thousands of hours I invested into this game. Instead of choosing one class, you get to choose two in Grim Dawn and mix and match skills from both of the trees. Titan Quest 2 also uses a similar system, but it hasn't reached its peak yet, since it only has a handful of masteries in the early access version. So, if by any chance you played Titan Quest 2 and you like the idea of the progression, you might want to try out Grim Dawn just to see the potential of this crazy system. Titan Quest 1 also had the same method of doing the progression system. So Grim Dawn is not the only game using the dual mastery system, although it's definitely the only game that uses it to its fullest potential. Create has done such a great job with supporting this progression system and expanding it by adding new items and constellations. Oh yeah, constellations are another line of progression on top of your masteries. It's a bunch of passive and some active skills that you can assign to various skills as procs. Once again, Crate tried to make these systems and mechanics as immersive as possible, so you have to interact with the world in order to get more constellation points. It's simply done by finding these shrines all across the world and offering some items or clearing waves of monsters. Years of updates have made the progression system in Grim Dawn simply amazing, and I hope Titan Quest 2 will have something similar when it's feature complete. One of the notable gameplay changes in semi-recent updates is related to the potion system. I have no idea when they actually changed this, I really don't remember, but it's a pretty big change. In the past, you would have to buy a large quantity of potions for health and energy. It was an old school way of doing potions in aRPGs that 99% of aRPGs had. The way this works now is completely different. Now you have a simple cooldown on your health and energy potions. Before this change, you would need to spend a large amount of money to just buy the potions, but that's no longer the case. Now it's just like a simple potion flask system that you don't need to buy or refill, it's all about the cooldown. Most modern aRPGs use a similar potion system nowadays, and now Grim Dawn is also one of them. The new expansion will introduce even more changes to the potion system, by the way. Now, if you didn't play the game for at least a couple of years, you're probably going to get surprised with the new dodge ability. All characters have a default dodge button now that you can use, which goes on a cooldown. This might not seem like a huge deal, but if you remember how the game was before, it's actually a massive difference. The gameplay in Grim Dawn used to be way more static, so having more movement skills is a game changer. It seems like they also used this opportunity to design new boss mechanics around your ability to dodge, and I'm pretty sure we can expect even better usage of this mechanic in the newest expansion with new boss fights. Like I said, these changes are not exactly new, but if you're a new player or a returning player who hasn't played the game in a while, this might take you by surprise. New player experience in Grim Dawn is so different compared to just a few years ago, even though the majority of the game's actual content hasn't changed that much. I forgot to mention that Shattered Realms is also going to get some major updates in the expansion. Endgame systems in Green Dawn are not extremely deep, but you can still try to push your build to its limits in the Shattered Realms, killing super bosses, hunting down nemesis bosses, and clearing roguelike dungeons. I'm also really excited for the Ascension mode because, like I said before, Crate is trying to make the campaign the third pillar of the endgame. It will be interesting to see how that turns out. Endgame was never the main reason why I love Grim Dawn, but I still think it's important for a game like this. And having an actual campaign as an endgame sounds like a crazy fun concept. And that would be it, pretty much. I will continue playing Green Dawn in between other games I have to play for new videos and patiently wait for the new expansion. I hope this video helped you with learning about new major features of the expansion and some other features which were added in the meantime. Tell me what you think about Grim Dawn and the upcoming expansion in the comments below. Did you play the game before, or maybe you want to try it out for the first time? I don't think I'll ever get bored of this game, and I'll gladly feature it on the channel once again in the near future when the expansion drops. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.